What is the nature of consciousness? Is consciousness produced by the brain, by the complex interaction of neurons in the brain, or is there more to this mystery than anything we have yet to discover? Take a moment, if you will, to become aware of the space in which this experience is happening. The mystery of consciousness is not only one of the biggest remaining questions in modern science, it's also at the very core of all of these spiritual traditions from all throughout human history, this one central question: what is the self? Beyond the names that we were given, beyond our human identity, what is that deeper truth to who and what we are? For thousands of years, spiritually awakened beings, from Aristotle to Lao Tzu, have been telling us that self-knowledge is the key to wisdom. It's the key to awakening and higher states of consciousness. But what does it even mean to know ourselves in this deeper way, and how do we cultivate this self-knowledge? In this video, we're going to look at the nature of consciousness, and I'm going to share some simple exercises that we can use to explore our own consciousness and see how deep this mystery really goes. Welcome back to Cosmic Consciousness. My name is Jonas, and for several years now here on this channel, I've been presenting rational and scientific evidence that consciousness is much more mysterious than anything we have even begun to discover. In fact, I believe that consciousness is beyond this human lifetime. It's part of something much greater than this one physical body. And whether we call it cosmic consciousness, soul, spirit, life force, rediscovering this deeper truth to our being is the path of spiritual awakening and liberation. Now, of course, mainstream science disagrees with that perspective. Science, for the most part, teaches a materialist worldview where consciousness is produced by the physical brain almost as an accident of evolution, and there is nothing more to what we are than flesh and bone. But is that really true? I mean, no one knows, right? There's no way of proving scientific materialism, and the truth could be far stranger. And even despite all of the incredible advancements that science has made, we still have no answer for what's known as the hard problem of consciousness, which goes as follows. If the atoms and protons and neutrons, the particles which make up our brain, don't themselves have any consciousness, then how can a collection of mindless particles somehow come together to create a mindful experience? In other words, why isn't all of this brain activity just happening in the dark with no one here to perceive it? This hard problem of consciousness has led some leading researchers and theorists to challenge the assumption that consciousness is produced by the brain and suggest another possibility, that consciousness is actually fundamental to nature, just like space or time or energy or mass. One way of understanding this is by comparing the brain to a computer. A computer is powered by electricity, and yet it doesn't produce or generate the electrical current, right? The electricity exists independently of the hardware of the computer. Just in the same way, the brain biocomputer doesn't necessarily produce consciousness. It could be that consciousness exists independently of the hardware of our brain. Panpsychism, for example, is one theory which proposes that mind or consciousness is a fundamental feature of life and nature which exists throughout the cosmos. Some quantum physicists suggest that consciousness is non-local, meaning that it exists independently of this physical body and outside of space and time altogether. And again, this is what all of these spiritually awakened beings have been telling us for thousands of years, that within every single one of us is this deeper essence, this pure life force, this pure consciousness that is beyond this human lifetime. It's transcendent. But here's the key point to this whole video, is that we each have the potential to know this truth for for ourselves, to experience it for ourselves. But it requires turning our attention inwardly and exploring our inner experience. It's just like the ancient proverb that the teacher can show us the door, but we ourselves must step through and enter. So how do we do that? Well, I'll share some simple exercises that we can use to explore our own consciousness together here and now, if you would like to join me. Now, first we can start by just becoming aware of the space between our ears. What do you find there in this area in your experience? It's like there's this window, this opening of consciousness, this field of consciousness. It's undeniable that we are aware. This feeling of amness. I am. What is this I? Who is the one that is aware? It's important to note that we're not looking for answers in the mind in the form of thoughts. We're looking to go even deeper than the mind, to get in touch with that place in which all of the thoughts are flowing through. Awareness is here even when we're not thinking, right? As Eckhart Tolle said, consciousness is a vast ocean and thoughts are waves and ripples on the surface. We do spend a lot of time on the surface, right? But we can dive deeper beneath the activity of the mind into that space between our thoughts. What do you find remains if there are no thoughts? What is still here? And maybe you can begin to notice that there is an incredibly peaceful quality to that when we come out of the mind and just return what's to here and feel inwardly. There's a stillness to it. Now, I believe that this facilitates a natural process of spiritual awakening and evolution. Just being. We don't have to do anything. It's just about being present and sensing, feeling, becoming aware. Just in the same way that if we feed a flower with water and nutrients and sunlight, the natural consequence is growth. If we feed ourselves with presence, with stillness, and introspection in this way, going deeper than the mind, the natural consequence of that is spiritual evolution. Now I want to share one more exercise to emphasize how deep this mystery of consciousness really goes, how we all have an ocean within us that is waiting to be explored. Now take a moment, if you will, to revisit in your mind's eye your childhood home, the place where you grew up. What memories or images or feelings come up as you revisit that place? Now what's interesting about this experiment is that just a few moments ago, all of these, early childhood memories were somewhere within us, but they weren't in our conscious mind. They were in the unconscious or the subconscious parts of our mind, right? You've probably heard the mind or consciousness compared to an iceberg, where the vast majority is beneath the surface. It's outside of our awareness. Only the tiniest tip of the iceberg is visible, right? But what are those places? What are those deeper aspects to our being that are outside of our everyday awareness, the unconscious mind? Through these practices of self-awareness and meditating on our own consciousness, this is how we cultivate a self-knowledge of these deeper aspects of our being. And I think even a better metaphor than an iceberg is that consciousness is like an ocean. It's vast. It's infinite. By going more and more and more deeply inwards, again, meditation is the key, and psychedelic substances can also be a hugely powerful tool in this exploration. But by going more and more deeply inwards into the nature of consciousness, Eventually, we discover that the true nature of consciousness is beyond this lifetime. It is universal, it is infinite. This is cosmic consciousness. Or, as Ramana Maharshi once said, I am is the name of God. God is none other than the Self. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video.